This is Akashwani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on combating forest fires in intense heat wave. The participants are Nishant Verma, Additional Chief Forest Conservator, Protection and Disaster Management, and Mukul Sanwal, Environmentalist, and Arjun Chaudhary, Anchor.
I'm joined by Shri Nishant Verma, who is an IFS officer, Indian Forest Service officer, posted in Uttarakhand, and Shri Mukul Sanwal, who is an eminent environmentalist. And today we will be discussing on combating forest fires and the intense heat wave, especially in this period between March and June, and the forest fires that have engulfed Uttarakhand especially, and the risk of forest fires all across the country. Nishant Verma ji, could you tell us regarding the steps taken by your department to douse these forest fires, and how have they been caused, and what are the steps being taken to ensure it does not happen in the future?
Just I wanted to inform you that currently we are having the forest fire season in Uttarakhand, and because of the temperature rise and a continuous dry spell in this area, and because of winds also, the fire incidences are taking place in our state. We have a FSI forest fire alert system by which we are getting the satellite alerts 4 times a day, and as soon as we get the alerts from the satellite sensors, we disseminate it into our field functionaries, to our field formations, and as soon as we get the alert, we disseminate it, and the crew teams are directed to reach the site and douse the fire. So we are emphasizing that minimum response time is taken while dousing the fire, and at the same time we are sensitizing the local communities also to mobilize and support us in our cause of forest fire mitigation. And the prime reasons of this fire is stubble burning that people are doing in their agriculture field. So we are sensitizing the local villagers also not to ignite the stubble, and if it is very necessary to burn it, it should be burned under monitoring so that it doesn't extend to the nearby forest. And also we are sensitizing the local people, and also we have developed our confidential network also. We are tracking that whether there is any deliberate attempt by any person to ignite the fire, and this time strict legal action is also being taken against the people who are deliberately igniting fire, and we are ensuring that with the minimum response time the fires are doused. And the main sensitive areas where the fire incidences are taking place are the areas where we have this tree dominated forest, and as a long-term strategy we are emphasizing on increasing the collection of pirul also. The street pine needles are locally called pirul, and we are ensuring that this pirul collection takes place, and we are in a process of establishing some briquettes and pallet making units also, so that this cheer pirul gets converted into important products and can be used as fuel.
Sanwalji, for the benefit of our listeners, could you tell us what are the causes of a forest fire in India? Is it because of the intense heat wave now, or has it always been a factor to be considered by the forest department when it looks at the condition of our ecology?
Forest fires are actually part of the natural evolution of forests and forest ecosystems. Nature has this provision of forest fires. The ground soil is burnt, fresh grass comes out, and fresh ecosystem, new ecosystem, or a stronger ecosystem develops, which includes not just the fauna but also the flora and the microorganisms which benefit the soil. So it's a complex process that has a natural origin. That is the first point. The second point is that yes, forest fires in Uttarakhand, in the pine forests, and pine forests throughout the world have been a feature because of the oil content, the turpentine content in these trees, and in the pine needles would carpet the soil. So any cigarette butt dropped by a passerby, which used to be a common factor in the past because the villages were not connected by road, people moved around on foot, and it was quite common at that time that a bidi or a cigarette would be thrown on the side of the road, which could ignite a small forest fire. The difference is that time there was a lot of movement of human beings on these tracks and within the forest going from one place to another, and immediately people would collect and douse the flames. So the second point is that yes, it has been a feature in the past, but earlier because of the higher population, higher human traffic in these areas, it was easy to handle because they would quickly douse the flame. And that is a feature even today. If the flame is quickly doused, it does not spread. But what has now happened is that temperatures are rising, population is getting reduced, and fewer people are walking on foot in these forests. So the reaction time and the kind of problems that are facing are of a different magnitude. Now, this is what the Forest Department has to face, and not just around Nainital, which is more in the news today, but in an entire belt in the mid-Himalayas. And that belt was where most of the people were living in the villages, most of the district headquarters are located, and which have a large number of pine forests. So what we find today is that along with these natural causes, we have higher temperatures and there are fewer people to douse the flame immediately. Now, what has happened in Nainital is very interesting. The fact that the forest fires came close to a habitation, actually a district headquarters, division headquarters, the seat of the High Court, and that attracted more attention in the press. According to the Forest Department, Uttarakhand, in April, there were 7,000 complaints about small and big forest fires throughout the state, 7 times more than last year. So even last year, there were 1,000 events. Now, all those events go unreported, unknown to the outside world, but because of Nainital, we came to know about it. And then, most important of all is, what did we do about it? What did the government of Uttarakhand do about it? Which is also very significant. They reacted promptly. Now, the Indian Air Force, they use what is called a Bambi bucket. A Bambi bucket is a contraption, I think it's about 40 years old, where you dip this plastic into a lake or a river, and when you raise the plastic, the valve at the bottom closes, and it can be released by the pilot. So the idea is that you can drop the water with almost pinpoint accuracy as to where you want it to go. And that underlines a very important feature of forest fires, that normally fires are doused by using water. But in the hills, in the mountain areas, in the Himalayan tracts, in these forests, you don't have water sources of the kind that you have in the plains where you call a fire brigade and then they pump water into the burning building or building area. So you have to bring water from outside, which is only possible through helicopters, or you have to have the local people to douse the flames by beating the edges.
Mukul Sanwalji, yes, you've explained to us the importance of the Bambi bucket, which is being used by the Indian Air Force choppers, and the difficulties really of dousing a flame in the hills where there is a raging fire. What about fire lines which are created, pakka versus kacha, so that the spread of the fire is checked? Which are the agencies that are doing this on the ground, and what are the risks involved?
See, these forest lanes are a feature in the forests of Uttarakhand and in all forests. They are part of the process of forest management. Basically, what it means is that you clear the undergrowth from a section, single lane road, so that the fire doesn't hop across. Now, here we come across another very important distinction, that there are 2 types of forest fires. One is along the ground, and the other is along the crown of the trees. Now, the forest fires that we have raging right now are the ones that go along the ground and not on the crowns. Forest fires, California, Canada, parts of Europe have been crown fires, which means that they jump from one crown to another and are almost impossible to douse until they kind of peter out themselves, because you cannot reach them. Because our forest fires were the ones following the ground, fire lanes worked. Now, fire lanes, as you said, of 2 kinds. One would be the ones that every certain patches in the forest were demarcated and forest lanes have been made throughout these forests. The pakka forest lanes are basically roads, so that you try to prevent the forest fire from jumping across the road. And you cannot have pakka roads into the interior forest, but they serve the purpose. But again, as I pointed out earlier, they by themselves, they were not effective. They were effective because the places were habited. Even the forest had people going for firewood or grass, and there would be immediate response from the local population. Now, that community involvement has now diminished because they don't need to go to the forest for fuel and fodder. We are giving them compressed natural gas. So the advance of modernity, basically, people seeking jobs outside, communication by road where people are not walking around, women are not going into the forest to collect firewood. So all those changes that had taken place in society, basically what we call economic development, has affected the traditional means of controlling forest fires, which meant the forest lanes and the local population combining together. It was not so much the forest department. What you see today, the outside element that is coming in the Air Force, the relief people, the Prantiya Raksha Dal, they didn't exist earlier. It was a community effort. It was the locals who would douse the flames. So we now need to think of another method of dealing with this, because the traditional fire lanes, as I said, and a very important point, was not just creating a physical barrier, but also bringing around people to make sure the fire didn't cross that barrier.
Mukul Sanwalji, the NDMA has also given some preventive guidelines and how to take action when there's a forest fire. Could you tell us something about the satellite-based remote sensing technologies and GIS to prevent forest fires? Because I'm sure Nainital, which is an ongoing forest fire action being taken, there's also Haldwani of Chamba, Ramnagar, where forest fires have extended. There are 8 forest fires right now as we speak, but I'm sure the administration is looking at preventing this kind of a forest fire spread in other states as well. So how do you see preventive tools with the remote sensing technologies and GIS being able to do that?
See, you're absolutely right. 100 hectares has been lost in Uttarakhand so far, and fires are still raging. Some are being put off, new ones are coming in. But when we look at methods of preventing fires, there are a couple of methods that have been followed. GI remote sensing is a new one. Forest watch towers were established, and part of the job of the forest department, forest rangers, forest guards was in this season, April, May, June, to keep a watch on the fires and then communicate to the villagers. Now the question here is that today we have mobile phones. So a villager can report, can communicate, there is a forest fire, people can see the smoke. The question is the response. Now, when we bring in the satellite imagery, satellite imagery will detect the heat source, will pinpoint the geo-coordinate locations and inform the state government. But it is more useful to map the spread of the forest fire, the direction of the spread, taking into account the wind direction, the slope, etc., rather than preventing the forest fire, because it can only detect a fire once it has happened. And the reaction time by the time it gets to the ground will be slower than the local people themselves acting on it, because they are right there. This is their job at this point of time. But yes, it will give us an idea of the spread, it will give us an idea of the total damage, but not so much a preventive tool as more of a planning tool and more of an analysis and assessment tool at the end of all this.
Could you also give us an idea of the heat wave conditions, which is also leading to forest fires? We have the El Nino effect, you have the IMD projections for temperature between the months of March all the way till June.
Yes, increased heat is an enabling condition. It is an essential condition in a sense. You have to have the right conditions for something to ignite. But someone has to ignite it. If you don't have high winds where 2 twigs rubbing against each other would ignite a forest fire, there are cases, natural causes, but very, very few. Most of it is human interference. And the heat wave is a contributory factor, is an enabling factor. But more important than that, or probably equally important than that, is the fact that generally in the hills, you have more rainfall events spread throughout the year, including at this time. Now, at this particular time, the IMD is telling us there is no forecast for rain. Now, that is what is creating, I think, a new, rather serious situation, because generally you have these convection currents, the heat and some kind of rainfall moisture will come down, and that will douse the flames or at least reduce the spread. Now, I think the local administration would be less disturbed rather by the heat than by the fact that there is going to be a dry spell around the corner for a while, and they would need to bring external intervention and not natural intervention. I have spent 15 years in the Climate Change Secretariat, and I can tell you that what we are witnessing is climate variability. It is not climate change so far. So what we are seeing is that the normal pattern of climate, or weather rather, that existed in the past, where would say that monsoon will strike Kerala on the 1st of June. I think last year it was delayed by 2 or 3 days. That is part of climate variability. Seasons where you don't have rain, you get rain. So climate variability has become a fact, not only for us, but throughout the world.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your expertise opinion on combating forest fires and how the different departments and agencies of the government are combating this menace that society is facing right now. Thank you so much for your contribution in this program.
Thank you.
You are listening to a discussion on combating forest fires in intense heat wave. The participants were Nishant Verma, Additional Chief Forest Conservator, Protection and Disaster Management, and Mukul Sanwal, Environmentalist, and Arjun Chaudhary, Anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani.
समाचार सेवा प्रभाग से प्रस्तुत है हमारा साप्ताहिक कार्यक्रम पब्लिक स्पीक।